Okay, welcome to my first Beyond the Books episode. I'm so grateful for everyone tuning in, and I am grateful to have our wonderful guest here today, Candice Smith.
Hey,
Thank you so much
Destiny.
for joining us.
It's my absolute pleasure.
It's always an honor talking to you. Before we jump into anything, I do want to give just a little introduction about who you are.
Okay.
And why it'd be so beneficial to hear from you today.
All
So,
right. Keep it brief.
so as I previously mentioned, today we have Candice Smith. She is a former director of engineering functional excellence at the Boeing Company, where she led enterprise level initiatives impacting over 55,000 engineers globally. She has held a range of leadership roles at Boeing, including the Deputy Chief Engineering of Boeing Global Services, Director of Global Engineering and External Technical Affiliations. And because that is not it, this is a talented woman, y'all. She was the Chief of Staff to the Chief of Technology Officer. But her journey did not start there. It started where a lot of our journeys have started as a co-op student. And throughout the years, with her dedication, excellence, and trailblazing, she has rose through the ranks and become a leader shaping the future of engineering. She currently holds a bachelor's of electrical engineering and a master's of systems engineering. She's also a veteran of the Illinois Army, National Guard, a STEM advocate, and a mentor and community leader. Today, she is here to talk with us about building authentic, long-term relationships in the corporate world, navigating challenges, and growing your confidence and network without losing your authenticity. So, Candace, with all of that being said, I just again want to thank you so much for being here, taking time to share your knowledge. It's always a great conversation with you.
And thank you so much, Destiny, first of all, for doing this and creating a way for people like me who have had, a wonderful career, and that's behind them, especially to have some time and a space to share some of the knowledge that you just can't get from the books. And so I think this is a wonderful thing that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So kind of just touching on what I talked about a little bit. The goal of this session with you today is going to be just kind of lessons in building strong strategic work relationships with companies, from the student and executive side. So when we are out in that field, kind of knowing what to do from there. So we'll
I
hop right
agree.
in with our first question. Our first question is going to be, can you share a time when a student made a lasting impression and what did they do right?
This is a good question. Now that I'm no longer, I'm kind of in my gap year. I'm not in the workforce. I've had a lot of time to reflect on the people that I've met and the relationships that I really treasure, outside of the day to day aspect of having, a job to go to every day. One particular instance comes to mind. So I was at a speed mentoring event, and there was this really special moment that I just always go back to. It was for the National Society of Black Engineers, where the students rotate seats every 15 minutes to come and converse with professionals in different fields. And so
Mhm.
this young man sat down in front of me. He did not smile. I'm a smiler. He barely made any eye contact. I lock in, and his greeting started real slow, like very slowly. And it seemed like he, was uncomfortable. And I was all prepared to like put him at ease and spark the conversation. And then he started talking about himself. He started talking about his school experience. And he asked these meaningful questions. Every single one of them indicated that he had prepared for the speed mentoring.
Mm.
He jotted down notes. He asked follow up questions. And while he wasn't the social being that I am, I was so impressed with how prepared he was. And I must have talked to 10 plus students that day. And every single one of those students, I gave my card and said, our conversation doesn't have to end here. You know, Let's stay in touch. He is the only one that did. He reached out via
Wow.
email, invited me to one of his robotics competitions. And I can tell you that 10 years later of mentoring him, he is now a friend and somebody that I feel really privileged to have had that moment. And we spent 10 years in each other's lives. So that just really made an impression how prepared he was for that conversation.
That is so beautiful and that's
Yeah.
amazing. Honestly, I think as a student, we're going into these spaces where we are intimidated because we don't
Oh,
have
yeah.
that experience under our belt. We're still finding and navigating ourselves. So it is good to hear that like just coming in prepared will set you
Yes.
aside from the rest.
Take your
That
time
was
to just
great.
prep. Yeah.
Okay, will do, will do. Hopping into our next question. What advice would you give to students trying to build and maintain relationships with professionals after events, like conferences or
Yeah.
panels, as you
Yeah.
mentioned?
Okay. I would say after meeting people at conferences or panels, I mean, think about the sheer number of people you're going to meet going to conferences, going on, business trips, just out in the community. I think it's important to, one, accept that not everybody's going to be your friend. You may have a wonderful interaction with someone and never hear from them again, and that is okay. I think
Hmm.
that early career, professionals need to decide what kind of relationships that they want to build with people that they meet. And everything
Mm,
can't be, this strategic, I got to move and shake. Some of it is going to be really organic. It's going to be very natural. And some of them you're going to have to put the effort into. But don't overthink it. Early in
hmm.
my career, I thought, oh, I just met, this impressive person. That's my new bestie. And no, they weren't. I would reach out and maybe I didn't hear back from them or I heard, kind of a lukewarm response and I got in my head about it. And looking back, I can say just, try to stay out of your head. You're
Hmm.
now in the era of where you can exchange social handles, you can quickly scan QR codes to connect. And when you do those things, connect with the intent to stay in touch. Engage with their content on social media. Bring to their attention your content on professional social media. Not,
Of
sometimes
course.
we get in those moments, right? But bring
Hmm.
that professional material content to their attention in a way that makes it low pressure, right?
Mm,
And then I would say find that common ground of professional interest to kind of engage with people around. And if you're not on the socials, if you're not on LinkedIn, if you're not on Slack channels and things like that, reach out directly. But you first got to decide what kind of relationship you want to have so that you can know how to cultivate it. And every relationship has, a foundation, building blocks of respect and trust and getting to know a person so you can understand the boundaries of the relationship before you blow past them by making a big ask or, just assuming the wrong thing. But I would definitely say be intentional about how you
hmm.
build those relationships. Decide what you want it to be. You're going to see some of the same people on the conference circuit, and that's going to happen very naturally. But for the people you want to intentionally be in touch with, and don't just target the CEO or this executive or that executive, go after people you meet that are cool, that are at your level, or even younger people. Become a mentor. But you just got to decide the kind of relationship you want to have and put yourself out there. Don't overthink it.
This is so true and such good gems because it's so easy to overthink it. Like, I'm thinking from a student perspective, I'm always like, okay,
Yeah.
so I want them to be my mentor. How many times a month do we have to meet? What am I going to talk about this month? And when you
Yeah.
do have those organic and authentic connections, that comes a whole lot easier
Oh,
versus
yeah.
you trying to shove your foot in the door and have this robotic connection. So, good gems there.
Yeah.
Rolling into our next question, was there a time in your own career where you had to push past fear or discomfort to make an important connection?
Oh my gosh. So, so many times it felt like every interaction, was pushing past the fear of, but I learned a lesson. I want to say the hard way, but it ended up being for the better. I remember going to this technical conference, and a colleague invited me to sit at her table for the dinner keynote. I didn't know anybody at the table, and the vibe was not exactly social. And so, to avoid discomfort, I just, struck up with a conversation with the guy next to me. At first, he was polite. He listened to me talk about my work. And then it felt like he was into it, and he started asking technical questions, which I then received as a not so polite challenge. This was just coming from some place within me, right? I
Hmm.
answered his questions. We kind of started going back and forth. He countered with what his experience was. I countered with ways to do it better and ideas. And eventually we simmered down because my colleague shot me this look. And then the keynote started, right? And I'm like, what's up with that? And then I sat there brooding because I was uncomfortable with how his questions made me feel. So later, my colleague was like, that was the VP in engineering, and you shouldn't have talked to him like that. And I'm a kind person, but when I know what I know what I know, and we're having an exchange, it's a conversation. And she said, you should have let him do all the talking. And I just didn't know that, And so she made me feel like I did something wrong. And I'm like, man, this guy's going to get me fired. So I shoot him a note, right? I sent him an email and I'm like, it was great to meet you. Thanks for the great conversation. Let me apologize in advance if, I said anything to make you uncomfortable. Several weeks went by and I'm thinking I am definitely getting fired. He didn't respond to me. And I got an email. I saw it in my inbox and it was, from him. And it was inviting me to a roundtable to share details on some of the process improvement suggestions that I made at dinner. The dude was listening. This guy was listening, and I wanted to turn him down because I felt like, again, that I had done something wrong, and my manager made me do it. When I showed up in that room, this guy greeted me with a smile and was like, this is the young engineer I was telling you all about who talked my head off, but she has some really good things to say.
Wow.
Uh, and that was over 15 years ago, and we're still in touch. We are still in touch.
Wow.
Yep. Even though I've left the company, we are still in touch. Yep. So I was
Wow.
uncomfortable thinking I did something wrong. I was uncomfortable thinking he was challenging me, and I pushed past it and built this connection that really served me well in my career.
That's amazing. And you were
Yeah.
authentic. That's really what I grabbed from there. You walked
Yeah.
into that room, you were authentic, you shared your authentic ideas, in a vulnerable space. And like, look at the connection that you were able to
Yeah.
make through doing that. That's amazing.
Yeah. And some of it's
Wow.
like, I
Okay.
didn't know I wasn't supposed to talk to this guy, and
Hmm.
lo and behold, without that preconceived notion, I did. I had a normal conversation that I would have with somebody in the office as we, exchange ideas respectfully, but very directly.
Hmm. And it's almost like when you have built your character and you know your morals and you
Mm.
know how to present yourself, you know how you want to present yourself, it almost doesn't really matter what
Oh yeah.
person you're talking about, what role, what title they have, because
That's
you're
right.
just presenting authentically and you've already built that character. So that's pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm always in awe of you, Candice.
I surprise myself sometimes.
So, what are some of the common challenges that you've seen young professionals run into when they are entering the corporate environment?
Um, common challenges from my mentees and even from when, I was in my executive position, um, communication is a huge, huge challenge. And not just the way you talk to people. I think young professionals, they don't struggle. It goes both ways. Seasoned professionals and young professionals both struggle to kind of listen, to learn and understand each other. And then when speaking, they struggle to speak, to share, or to inform, and it feels challenging. Even the nonverbals are becoming harder to read. So I think I would just advise young people, early career folks, to lead with respect, communicate with respect and expect the same from their colleagues. Just because you're a young professional doesn't mean that you don't know what you're talking about. but it also means you have a lot to learn. And people should
Mm-hmm.
engage with you respectfully, but also effectively. And you have to do the same. And I think this really helps when like sharing ideas and making decisions or even trying to like prevent or resolve conflicts. And you brought up the word authenticity. I that was me before it was popular to be so. But let's be real honest with ourselves that as young professionals, it should be understandable that you are still figuring out yourself as an early career professional in the context of this new environment, of this new phase in life. And so you have to give yourself some grace as you figure out how to engage in these new environments and how that shapes you to become who you will become. But also know that you belong there. And I think all of that conflict and sometimes the struggle and misunderstanding stems from ineffective communication. So I would say that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the biggest challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something you said that stuck out to me was like, you belong there. And I think as a young professional, that statement or that roadblock right there gets you over the hump of communication so much
Oh, yeah.
quicker. Once you realize that you do belong in the room that you're sitting in, you can start to build the character that you want to be and start engaging in these conversations. So that is a definitely huge nugget right there.
Yeah.
Um, how should someone handle difficult feedback or tough situations in a professional setting,
Um,
especially early in the career?
Whew, difficult feedback. I mean, that gave me, that triggered me a little bit. I would say, and this is probably going to be counter to what you have heard, but not all feedback is a gift,
Mm,
especially when it's unsolicited. I cannot tell you the number of times someone has offered me feedback and they were ill intended.
mm,
And I was young and impressionable, and you know I have a personality that I'm curious and I want to help, and and sometimes that might make people uncomfortable, but that's not my problem. Because I never come off in a way or came off in a way that would be disrespectful or exclusive or any of that.
mhm,
And I would be given feedback to kind of tone this down or tone that down. And I'm just thinking to myself, I can't even help that. That feedback wasn't helpful. That was not a gift. That was a hindrance. So I would say be mindful of where you are receiving your feedback and be intentional about how you accept it and making decisions about the feedback that you will take and do the one thing that you can do, which is control yourself, right?
mhm,
You have the only power you truly have is over you and how you respond or how you react or what you do, kind of governance of yourself. So I would definitely say when given difficult feedback, consider where it's coming from. When given difficult situations, consider your role, check yourself first, right? We all have a role to play in any conflict.
absolutely.
And what absolutely helped me early in my career, because sometimes I didn't understand where the conflict was coming from because I felt like I got along with everybody. I would go ask somebody else, hey, I got this piece of feedback, or this is a difficult situation. Can you help me work through it? Like, just help me be a partner in thinking through this. Here's what happened. Here's my perspective. And, be very intentional about asking that of someone who has the experience to help guide you. I always tell my young
Mhm,
daughter, my friends can't tell you how to spell a word when they're still learning themselves, right? There is some knowledge and wisdom somewhere in there, but go and find it from the people that have experienced it so that they can guide you the right way. And then you have to trust the
mhm,
person that you're asking that of. So I would definitely say take a step back. If you can, in a tough situation, take a step back, consider the feedback, consider where it's coming from, get some help in thinking through the situation and what you can do to deconflict it. And then if it's not working, go through formal channels. Don't neglect or don't underestimate the power of going through formal channels to help get some of your issues resolved. And if that doesn't work, go where you are valued. If that means you leave that project or that team or that company, go where you are valued, because instead of fighting to be great, you want to be given the space and allow the space to grow into that, technical greatness. I know not everybody I'm talking to is going to be an engineer, but
Mhm.
you want to be good at what you're doing in your profession. And you can't do that if you're constantly battling someone else's stuff.
Yes, that is so true, especially early in your career. You really do
Oh, yeah.
need to be in a space that is safe
Yeah.
for you to learn, for you to make those mistakes, for
Yes.
you to grow. And if you are
Yes.
battling, trying to find your technical skills and dealing with some outside forces that don't necessarily need to be
Yeah.
there, maybe that's just misalignment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And Destiny, there's always going to be stuff, right? Because we're people. Just because we're at work doesn't mean we, get this superpower of treating everybody well, right? We're still people that bring all of our stuff to work. But, I would definitely say try to find yourself or create an environment where it's comfortable enough for you to learn and grow and make those mistakes, but also do the work to recover from them, you know?
Mhm. Absolutely agree. Well, what would you say are some of the best ways that students can maintain relationships over the years, even after internships or graduation?
I'd like to think I'm an expert at this because I've done this very well. Again, since I'm no longer working, I've been very intentional about the relationships that I've had, but that's been built up over 20 years. I remember my
Mhm.
second internship. Um, my manager was also a young Black female. The first, I had never met a Black female engineer in my first internship, and now in my second, she was my manager. And I didn't immediately take it for granted, like, oh, I can ask her everything. And I kind of tested the waters. I would go to her and ask her questions, definitely about my job, but then I would ask her things not about my immediate roles and responsibilities, and she would answer them, and answer them with such wisdom that you think she'd been around there for 30 plus years, and it was the stuff that you can't read in books. How am I showing up? Hey, I heard this comment and it was, I kind of feel this way about it. What am I overreacting, or what do you think? And we just kind of had that relationship, because I asked a question, and then I started asking questions that my other girlfriends had because they didn't have a manager like that. They were like, oh, ask her this, and she would always answer them. And when I left that internship, I asked her if there's anything I could do to keep helping her. I know I can't work formally, but if there's anything I could do to help you, please don't hesitate to reach out. I appreciate you so much. She said the best thing you can do is do well in school so that you can graduate and become a great candidate to hire. I said, bet. I was going to do that already. And so I would reach out to her with, this was what, junior year. I would reach out with updates on how things were going and ask her how she's doing. And she would respond back with I need this perspective on this situation, early career situation, or some, just any way that made me feel like I was helpful. And I would always respond. So then when I graduated, I got several offers from the company. I went to work there. I stayed in touch with her, and she made a point of making sure that I went to career fairs out in the high schools, career days, any events where a young professional could go out and be a representative in the community. And because of that, she was teaching me how to be a mentor. And I didn't
Wow.
realize it at the time, right? She had mentored me, and then because she said, now go out, hey, I got this opportunity, go and do this. And of course I'm saying yes to her. I go out and be a mentor in the community, and I fell in love with it. And then I realized, oh, she was teaching me the power of mentoring. The same way you want to have a good friend, you got to be a good friend. The same way you want to
Mm,
have a good mentor, you got and be a good mentee, you got a mentor, so the other side of
mm.
it. And she's the reason I became a Delta, entered into the illustrious sisterhood. And so that connection just maintained and really shaped my life in a way that I never thought from the first day I sat down in front of her.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm so in awe. That is
Yeah.
such a good piece of advice, honestly. Like just keeping that contact, keeping that
Yep.
door open, sharing those little nuggets, sharing those little
Yep.
life updates. And I had never considered prior to this that being a mentor could like teach you some skills that you need as a mentee. And like
Absolutely.
absolutely amazing. It definitely is
Yep.
a two-way street that you need both perspectives on.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, rolling into our last question today,
Okay.
I would like to ask you, looking back, what do you wish more students knew about the power of building strong corporate relationships, not just for themselves, but also for whatever community that they represent?
Um, I would just say it's paramount. Many every job, with the exception of my executive jobs that I ever held, I applied for. I saw a job, I'm like, I want that job. I would go and apply for those jobs. But then I needed to talk to somebody about, making sure I was showing up as my best self as a good candidate, for the interview. Or I was walking in on day one as a person that they won't regret hiring. Those relationships make a world of difference. You spend so much time at work.
Yes.
Yes, now we're virtual, but even still, you dedicate so much of your day and your brain power, your mental capacity to your profession, to your job. And so those relationships are paramount because you are still a person.
Yes.
And none of it gets done without the relationships of a teammate, of a manager, of a mentor, or somebody that you don't even know have their eye on you and they're liking what they see, right?
Hmm.
And so those relationships make the difference between you getting that opportunity that you want so badly, or you getting that opportunity that scares the mess out of you, but you need it to propel you to your next step, or you needed to unlock that superpower that you may not have, explored. And then you also need those relationships because that enriches your life. I can tell you that I have genuine friendships with many people that I've worked with and worked for.
Mm.
20 years later, I'm still friends with my third manager. Somebody I was terrified of and then became terrified of disappointing. And then he had his first child and he was just there because I brought my stuff to work, he brought his stuff to work, and we were two people at work, moving through life. And we built a real friendship and maintained that friendship. And I could always count on him and he could always count on me. But who's to say we would have been friends if we would have just met on the street? I don't know. But we are friends because we worked and spent so much time of our lives together at work, trusting each other to do what we were supposed to do. And so I think
Yes.
those relationships are paramount. And everybody's not gonna be your friend. You're not at work to make friends per se, but don't think you can't make friends at work.
Yes. That is
Yeah.
such a great point, and that is something I've been learning navigating my different internship experiences.
Yeah.
It seems like you almost have to, it's this idea that you have to be two separate people. You have to
Yeah.
be like your work self and then your normal self. And there are some lines. However, because you do spend so much time at work, it is so beautiful when you are able to form those family-like relationships from
Yes.
having a piece of your authentic self there too. So I definitely myself have found some relationships from being
Yeah.
authentic, from being eager and eager to not disappoint too. That is real.
Yeah.
I have found some lifelong mentors along the way and
Yeah.
people that I can say are more like friends or aunts and uncles and things of all those natures. It definitely is possible to have strong corporate relationships.
It is.
Um,
That are real and authentic, that
yes,
are not meant to serve as a what can you do for me. And I'm not saying
yes,
it's going to happen organically, every time. I'm just saying be open to the possibility of.
Yes, this is very, very true. Keep yourself open, keep yourself authentic. It seems like those things will come your way naturally. Well, Candace, I am so thankful for your time today. It's always an honor. Your energy is contagious. Like you can just see your personality, it radiates through the screen.
Listen,
So,
it's a privilege to be on this side of my career, at this point. I've had a wonderful career. And, while it's behind me, it is one of the best things I could have ever done. And I will end by saying there is no secret sauce, Destiny. There's no linear path. Everything is a series of good decisions you can make, in the present to set you up for a wonderful future. And I'm so fortunate, and I earned the privilege, but I am privileged to have done that and to have gotten a lot of good advice and taken the advice and taken the action so that I can be in the position that I am in now to be available and comfortable and ready to impart and share my knowledge even though I've left the workplace. So I feel very fortunate.
thank you for that. I was truthfully just talking to a friend about you and how like amazing you are, and I'm like, what? I need her to write the game plan. Like, what's the game plan? What's the book? There's no sauce. Everybody, if
No
you're
sauce.
wondering, there's no sauce.
No secret sauce. Sorry. The bun is dry on the other side. There's no secret sauce.
But what I gathered today, the secret sauce is being authentic, being open to those connections, and knowing how to pivot. Knowing when there's misalignment, knowing
For sure.
knowing yourself, all of those things. That is going to be your secret sauce to navigating the corporate world and everything beyond. So I think we found you guys.
Yes.
Well, Candace, I just want to say thank you so much again. It was an honor. I'm so grateful to have had you been my first guest on Beyond the Books. And to everyone watching, I just want to say thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Destiny. Bye.
Bye. Okay, great.